There's a plant growing right now, probably within a few miles of where you're sitting, that could feed you breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. Not someday, not if scientists tinker with it. Today, this very hour. It's been doing this for 30,000 years. Your ancestors knew its name. They built entire civilizations around it. Then, about 150 years ago, we made a collective decision as a species to forget everything we knew about it, drain the places where it thrived, and replace it with crops that require us to dump billions of dollars of chemicals into the earth just to survive a single season. The strangest part? We didn't destroy it because it failed us. We destroyed it because it worked too well. Because you can't sell someone something that gives itself away for free. Because an economy built on scarcity cannot tolerate a plant that produces abundance 12 months a year without asking for anything in return. So we buried the knowledge, drained 100 million acres, and taught our children to call it a weed. But the plant remembers, and it's still here, waiting in the margins, offering the same gift it always has. This is the story of what we threw away, why we threw it away, and what it means that it refuses to stay gone. Let me take you back 30,000 years. Picture a riverbank in what we now call China, near the Yangtze River. It's the Paleolithic era, long before anyone thought to plant a seed in rows, long before the concept of a farm even existed. A group of humans is working with stone tools, grinding something into powder. Archaeologists would eventually find these tools, and when they analyzed the residue trapped in the grinding stones, they found something that shattered assumptions about ancient diets: starch grains. But not from any grain we recognize today. These came from the roots of a wetland plant, processed with care, turned into flour. Now jump across the world to a cave in Italy, same time period, same grinding stones, same residue. This wasn't an accident or a backup food source for desperate times. This was infrastructure. This was the foundation. 30,000 years ago, when survival meant understanding your landscape with absolute precision, knowing what to harvest and when to harvest it, people across continents independently came to the same conclusion: this plant feeds us first. The plant has a name, though it goes by many. In the scientific texts, it's called Typha latifolia. In English, we call it cattail, though that name barely scratches the surface of what it represents. Stand at the edge of any marsh, any pond, any slow-moving river, and you'll see them. Tall stalks rising from the water, topped with those distinctive brown cylinders that look like cigars, or, if you're generous with your imagination, the tail of a cat. They look simple, unassuming, the kind of plant you walk past without a second thought. But that's the magic trick of evolution, isn't it? The most powerful things often hide in plain sight. Here's what most people don't know. The cattail doesn't grow in one season and die like corn or wheat. It doesn't give you a single harvest and then demand you start over. It's a perennial, which means it comes back year after year from the same root system. But more than that, it produces food continuously, in stages, like a restaurant that never closes. 4 distinct harvests from a single plant, each one arriving in a different season, each one edible, each one nutritious. In early spring, when the world is barely waking up and most crops haven't even been planted yet, the young shoots of the cattail push up through the mud. You can pull them, peel away the outer leaves, and inside you'll find a white core, crisp and clean. The taste? Like cucumber with a hint of sweetness. Early European explorers in Russia tasted these shoots and immediately gave them a name: Cossack asparagus. It wasn't marketing. It was a delicacy. For people who had survived months of winter on preserved food, these shoots arriving in early spring weren't just nutrition, they were medicine. They were packed with vitamin C at a time when scurvy killed more soldiers than swords. But spring is just the opening act. By early summer, the green flower heads appear on the stalks before they mature into those brown cylinders we recognize. Harvest them at this stage, boil them for a few minutes, and you've got something that tastes remarkably like corn on the cob, except it's denser, richer, with an earthy complexity that sweet corn can't match. Indigenous peoples across North America harvested these by the thousands, dried them, stored them for winter. Then comes midsummer, and this is where the cattail shows off. The male flowers at the top of each stalk release pollen. This isn't the wispy, forgettable pollen that makes you sneeze. This is thick, golden, protein-rich powder that you can literally shake off the stalk into a container. A single plant can give you tablespoons of it. And here's the remarkable part. It's not just edible, it's nutritious flour, ready to use. Mix it with water, and you get bright yellow dough. Bake it, and you have cakes, breads, pancakes that sustained entire communities through seasons when other food sources ran thin. No grinding, no processing, no industrial mill required. Nature handed you flour directly. And then comes winter, the season when almost everything dies, when fields lie frozen and empty, when grocery stores in the modern world are the only thing standing between us and starvation. The cattail? It's been preparing for this moment all year. Underground, spreading through the mud, are the rhizomes. These aren't delicate roots. They're thick, substantial, packed with starch. Between 30 and 46% starch by weight. For context, a potato is about 17% starch. The cattail root is storing more than twice the energy. Here's where the math gets interesting. 1 acre of cattails, growing wild, with no human intervention, no fertilizer, no tilling, can produce 6,400 pounds of flour. Let me say that again. 6,400 pounds from a single acre. Compare that to wheat, which produces about 2,000 pounds per acre under ideal conditions with extensive agricultural inputs. Corn? About 3,000 pounds. The cattail produces more food per acre than the crops we've built our entire civilization around, and it does it without anyone planting a seed. The indigenous people of North America understood this in their bones. The Paiute people had a clan called the Cattail Eaters, not as an insult, not as a mark of poverty, but as an identity. The Klamath people called themselves the Cattail people. When ethnobotanist Daniel Moorman compiled his massive database of Native American plant use, cataloging thousands of species and their applications, the entry on cattails stretches longer than almost any other plant. Tribe after tribe, from coast to coast, anywhere water touched land, people built their lives around this plant. They dried the roots and pounded them into flour for porridge that would last through winter. They wove the leaves into mats so tight they were waterproof, using them to cover wigwams and canoes. They twisted the fibers into cordage stronger than hemp, rope that could secure a shelter in a storm or catch fish from a river. The fluffy down from the seed heads? They used it to insulate moccasins against snow and to line the diapers of infants. Even the jelly found between young leaves had a purpose. It's a natural antiseptic and numbing agent used to treat wounds and toothaches. One plant, food, medicine, shelter, clothing, tools. A mature stand of cattails can have 86,000 stems per acre. A single root system can spread to cover 3 acres without any human assistance. This wasn't agriculture as we understand it. This was infrastructure. This was wealth. For 30,000 years, from the Paleolithic to the 19th century, this was the definition of food security.
So here's the question that should haunt us. How does a food system this abundant, this reliable, this productive, simply disappear from human knowledge? How do we forget something that fed us for longer than recorded history? The answer isn't natural disaster, it isn't climate change, it isn't crop failure. It's policy, it's economics, it's the cold calculation that abundance is bad for business. The erasure begins officially in 1849. The United States Congress passes the Swampland Act. On paper, it's simple. The federal government will transfer millions of acres of wetlands to individual states. But there's a condition, a requirement written into the law. The states must drain them. Not can drain them, must. The logic of the time was brutally straightforward. A geological dictionary from 1822 defines a swamp as a piece of land with wet, miry soil. Such land is unprofitable or even a nuisance until it be drained. Read that again. Nuisance. That's the word they chose for the ecosystem that had fed the continent for thousands of years. Water standing on land was considered waste, empty space, a problem to be solved. By 1850, the Act expands. Arkansas, Alabama, California, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, Wisconsin. 50 million acres transferred with a single mandate: destroy the hydrology. The government doesn't just permit this, it actively promotes it. They publish guides. Technical manuals with titles like Draining for Profit become bestsellers. These aren't fringe documents. This is official policy, state-sponsored environmental destruction packaged as progress. Then in 1902, technology catches up to ambition. Someone invents the Buckeye Steam Traction Ditcher. It's a machine that can lay drainage tiles faster than 100 men working by hand. Suddenly, drainage isn't just policy, it's industry. The Great Black Swamp in Ohio, a massive wetland that had stood for thousands of years, acting as a carbon sink and food forest, is drained dry within decades. The Florida Everglades, 20 million acres of biological richness, gets channeled and diverted. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, drained. Between the 1950s and 1970s, agricultural drainage alone destroys 12 million acres of wetlands. Of the 221 million acres of wetlands that once existed in the lower 48 states, only 103 million remain by the end of the 20th century. More than half, gone. And with them, the cattails. What grows in their place? The Corn Belt, the richest agricultural region in the world, we're told. We trade a perennial, self-sustaining food system for annual crops that require billions of dollars in fertilizer, pesticides, and diesel fuel just to survive a single season. We replace plants that build soil with plants that erode it. We replace plants that clean water with plants that poison it. But here's what they don't tell you in the textbooks. Wetlands weren't just drained for farmland. They were drained because cattails had a fatal flaw in the eyes of the emerging industrial economy. They couldn't be controlled. You can't sell someone cattail seeds when the plant reseeds itself every year without help. You can't patent a plant that spreads across 3 acres from a single root system. You can't tax someone for walking into a marsh and gathering pollen. A perennial food system that regenerates itself, that gives away its surplus freely, is a direct threat to an economy built on scarcity, to a system that requires you to buy seeds every spring, to purchase fertilizer every season, to rent equipment, to go into debt for the privilege of growing food. The cattail offered abundance without asking for payment, and so it had to go. The wetlands were drained, the cattails were killed, and the knowledge was labeled primitive, something our ancestors did because they didn't know better, because they hadn't invented real agriculture yet. We buried 30,000 years of wisdom under the arrogant assumption that we had found a better way. But knowledge is harder to kill than plants. And nature has a peculiar habit of offering solutions to the very problems we create while trying to improve on it. Modern research on cattails begins again in the 1980s, not for food this time, but for energy. Scientists in Minnesota discover that cattails produce 22 tons of biomass per acre. That's a staggering amount of stored energy. But then, researchers find something even more important. Cattails are the kidneys of Earth. They absorb nitrogen and phosphorus from polluted water. Remember all that fertilizer we dump on cornfields? It doesn't stay there. It runs off into rivers and lakes, causing toxic algae blooms that kill fish and poison drinking water. Plant cattails at the edges and they soak up that pollution. Harvest 250 acres of cattails and you remove 5 tons of phosphorus from the ecosystem. Burn the biomass for fuel, and the ash that remains is pure fertilizer, ready to go back on the fields. It's a closed loop. The plant cleans up the mess we make with industrial agriculture while simultaneously providing food and fuel. The International Institute for Sustainable Development in Manitoba has been harvesting cattails commercially since 2012. They harvest 15 to 20 tons per acre. Each ton sequesters over a ton of carbon dioxide. And because cattails are perennial, you harvest them like mowing a lawn. Cut them and they grow back next year. No plowing, no planting, no erosion. Compare that to corn. Annual planting. Tilled soil that erodes with every rain, polluted water. Cattails heal water, build soil, sequester carbon, and produce food 12 months a year. But almost nobody knows this. We still call them weeds. Landowners across North America spend millions of dollars every year spraying herbicides to kill the most productive food plant on the continent. We are literally poisoning the solution to protect the problem. Think about what this means in practical terms. Right now, industrial agriculture is facing a crisis on multiple fronts. Soil degradation is accelerating. Topsoil, the foundation of everything we grow, is eroding 30 times faster than nature can replace it. We've lost a third of the world's arable land in the past 40 years. Water pollution from agricultural runoff has created dead zones in oceans where nothing can survive. The Gulf of Mexico has a dead zone the size of New Jersey, caused primarily by fertilizer washing down the Mississippi River from Midwestern farms. Meanwhile, climate change is making traditional agriculture increasingly unpredictable. Droughts devastate crops one year, floods destroy them the next. Farmers are trapped in a cycle of increasing inputs for decreasing yields. The solution, we're told, lies in genetic engineering, in developing new drought-resistant varieties, in precision agriculture with sensors and drones and AI. But what if the solution isn't in the laboratory? What if it's been growing in the ditches beside our farms this entire time, labeled as a nuisance, sprayed with herbicides, dismissed as a relic of a primitive past? The cattail doesn't need genetic modification. It already thrives in conditions that would kill corn. It grows in standing water, in brackish estuaries, in pristine mountain streams and polluted urban runoff. It adapts, it survives, it produces. Consider the implications for food security in a changing world. Cattails could grow in areas we've written off as agriculturally useless. Degraded wetlands, abandoned industrial sites, the margins of water treatment facilities. Places where conventional crops would never survive could become productive food forests again. And unlike our current system, which concentrates food production in a handful of regions and creates vast monocultures vulnerable to disease and climate shocks, cattails distribute abundance. Wherever there's water and land meeting, there's potential.
The story of the cattail isn't about rediscovery. It's about recognition. The knowledge was never truly lost. It was ignored, deliberately buried. And now, while the world spends billions engineering drought-resistant crops and carbon capture machines, the answer grows in the ditch by the side of the road. The plant that fed humanity for 30,000 years. The plant that survived the drainage of 65 million acres of its habitat. It never stopped offering its gifts. It simply waited for us to remember. This knowledge isn't locked in a laboratory. It grows in every marsh, every riverbank, every pond edge. The plant we called a weed may be the future we need. All it asks is that we look past the profit of the plow and see what was always there, what has always been there, waiting in the margins, the supermarket of the swamp, the gift we threw away right before we needed it most.